Enlightened teachers tell us that what we conceive in the mind is illusion, it's not reality. What do they mean by that?
That's a good question, actually, because to understand the mind of self, one must first understand the nature of conceptual thought. What is thought? How does the thinking process obscure the truth of who we really are? Consider a newborn child, for instance. When you entered the world, you had no conceptual knowledge about anything, right?
Right.
And no knowledge of your birth. That's because the mind of a newborn child is not yet developed. So when you first looked out onto the world, you did so without any preconceived notions or judgments about anything whatsoever. You looked upon the world in its natural state, without naming it, categorizing it, or analyzing it. Here, let's look at a chart. This is analogous to a newborn child. If this were real, this child would be aglow with light, because light enlivens the body. The body we now call you, and we give you a name. And you begin experiencing the world for the first time in reference to what your senses reveal. But concepts have yet to materialize or imprint in memory in any meaningful way because the conceptually thinking process has not yet fully developed. At this stage of one's development, you're essentially a pure manifestation of the consciousness that enlivens you. You sleep and wake, laugh and cry, the heart beats and the lungs breathe, but you have no conceptual awareness about what's going on. And none of this is happening at your direction. That's because a concept is not what life is, just as a concept is not who you are. So from a conceptual point of view, can you point to where you are in this diagram?
No, I don't see me, other than a body that other people might think of as me.
That's right, the me isn't there because a concept of me has yet to materialize or take root in the mind's eye. But concepts do arise, and as they do, we older folks gladly tell you, based on our own conditioning, what the world is like and how you should view it and act within it according to the concepts we've learned to identify with over the years. So here's this innocent child looking out onto the world, free of concepts, including the concept of me. But now the process of naming and identifying begins, aided by others continuously. At first, we have no sense of a separate self, a separate entity. But over time, we begin to take notice of these concepts that arise ever more frequently. And as we do, we're told that the world out there, as perceived through the senses, is separate from us, and we are separate from it. So we begin to see the world dualistically for the first time, from a dualistic point of view. Before long, we come to believe that these concepts, these images that arise in the mind, are real. And some of them seem to represent me, while others do not. I begin to think I am this, but not that. That thing over there is bad, but this thing over here is good. And all those people out there appear to be separate from me. They even act differently than me at times. I begin to compare, analyze, accept, or avoid things that I observe dualistically in reference to the concepts and experiences I now think of as me. What happens is we shift our attention away from the natural world as it truly is to the concepts we now imagine it to be. What was originally a holistic expression of Source coming to life in the form of a newborn child, free of judgment, is later corrupted by a false sense of a separate me and a separate you, as conceived within the mind of self. So as we grow older, we come to believe, along with everyone else, that we're a separate entity, and we interact with each other based on this pretense of a separate you and me, which in actuality is nothing more than a product of thought. And the consequence of this false sense of self is that we lose sight of who we truly are.
Okay, so the me is nothing more than a concept that I think is me?
Exactly. The whole notion of separate entities, of separate selves, whether this self or some future self, is an illusion created by thought. And the problem persists because the more we identify with thought, the stronger the self becomes. And the stronger the self becomes, the more we suffer the illusion of separateness. Self-centeredness is the root cause of all suffering. Fear, jealousy, anger, greed, anxiety, you name it, it's all caused by thought. and rooted in the illusion of self, of me versus you, of the good guys versus the bad guys, when in truth there's no separation from Source. There never was and never will be. It's only the self that thinks this is so.
So how do I go beyond thought? How do I find truth?
Well, actually, we don't find truth. It finds us, so to speak, if we're prepared to receive it, which is what the ancient teaching, "Prepare ye the way of the Lord," is pointing out. Or as in another ancient teaching, "Watch, wait, and listen, for ye know not when your Father may come." The Father being Source, or pure awareness of Source. Concepts are limited, therefore incapable of finding a limitless truth, which means we can't think our way to truth. Pure awareness is not a conceptual reality. But beyond concepts, truth is ever present, always, just as Source is ever present, always. In other words, present awareness is who we truly are and always have been. The evolutionary process we all go through is the biblical story of Adam. Like Adam, as we grow older, we become fascinated with the world as perceived through the senses and translated by the conceptually thinking process. Consequently, also like Adam, we lose our way. We become so identified with the dualistically thinking process that we only see the world in reference to the me, to the mind that creates the me, and react accordingly, as if we are separate when we're not. That's the devil's big lie, you see. The devil being concepts, experiences, and thoughts that we hold to and give power to as the me. Let's look at our illustration again. Einstein noted that everything appears within a field. Energy fields, gravity fields, magnetic fields, and so on. So concepts, like everything else, have their own field. Let's call it the energy field of thought. And as we identify with thoughts, we give them power. We bring them to life. But when we disidentify with thought, then that stillness wherein thoughts are no longer engaged allows for an environment in which an awakening can occur. As pure awareness awakens, thoughts dissipate and fall away. Thoughts cannot live in the presence of pure awareness, any more than a tree log can live in the presence of fire. So what's left when the concept of me is gone?
Pure awareness?
Yes. It never went anywhere. But our self-centeredness cut us off. So, like Adam, we become lost. But then, we're found. Absent the engagement of self, pure awareness is able to express more fully through highly evolved beings that are capable of realizing the wholeness of creation. This holistic expression of conscious awareness is in a very real way a pure expression of Source. It now moves and acts in accordance with the movement of the whole, not the part. And in so doing, not only allows for awakenings unto pure awareness to occur, but also for pure awareness to shine through. This revitalized expression of Source that is no longer corrupted by self is what we call an enlightened being. It is not I that speak, said Jesus, but the Father that speaketh within me, the Father being the pure awareness of Source.
But the thoughts, they don't go away. They continue to arise?
They do arise, but they no longer have power, so they don't take root. They fall away or move on back into the energy field from whence they came. In effect, the realization of pure awareness ends the conceptual you. The body lives, but the concept of you dies. In a previous lesson, we set forth a chart of the kingdoms, showing several kingdoms arising out of Source. Let's look at that again. Everything that appears in consciousness arises out of Source. We might say that Source is pure awareness at rest or perfectly still. So everything that arises out of stillness is a movement arising out of pure awareness into a form of conscious expression, whatever form that might be. And throughout this process, Source, or pure awareness, never goes away. It never abandons that which it creates. Different manifestations come and go within the kingdom shown here, but source is eternal. It never changes, it never disappears, it never dies. The only meaningful difference between a so-called enlightened being, as shown in this chart, and everything that appears within all the kingdoms from mineral to man is the fact that embodied within man is the capacity to realize pure awareness, the source of all creation, from within. There's a line in one of the Upanishads that points this out in this way. In truth, he who knows God becomes God, which is another way of saying he who knows source is aware of source. The Buddha, having realized the presence of pure awareness, called that realization nirvana. Lao Tzu called it the Tao, the way, the truth. Jesus referred to it as a new kingdom, which is not coming later in some future time, but is here now. It is within you, he said. Rejoice, for the time is fulfilled, and the kingdom of God is at hand. Awakening unto pure awareness does not require a journey. In fact, you can't get there from here. It is not about a future time and place that the self goes to or acquires or is reincarnated into in some future time to work things out. That's nonsense all created by thought. Awakening unto pure awareness simply requires the letting go of self, so that the self, absent the power to live, falls away. And as this process unfolds, pure awareness shines through. And in the light of that awareness, in the insights that arise, you come to realize that you are that you've never been anything but that, which is the ancient story of the prodigal son come home. But we cannot describe or pass on pure awareness one to another conceptually, because pure awareness is beyond concept, beyond thought. Pure awareness just is when the self is no more, and the self is no more when pure awareness arises in you.